Planeswalkers. These characters have the ability to jump from plane to plane across Magic the Gathering's vast multiverse, and they are often the main driving force of Magic the Gathering's story. Often these Planeswalkers are depicted on specific Planeswalker cards, with over 250 Planeswalker cards being printed since they were first introduced back in Lorwyn. Now, obviously there are many Planeswalkers that have multiple cards, but what you may not know is that there's actually a ton of Planeswalkers that we've never seen a card for. Some of the most well known of these missing Planeswalkers are the remaining 9 Titans. If you're unaware, in Magic the Gathering's old lore, back when Planeswalkers were basically gods, the Planeswalker Urza assembled 9 other Planeswalkers together to fight against the Phyrexian threat. And we can see that clearly depicted in the card Urza Assembles the Titans. Back when this story was being told, Planeswalker wasn't a card type yet, so none of these Titans actually had cards made for them. That was until 2014, when Freyalise got her own card in Commander 2014. And since then, Wizards has been sneaking in the 9 Titans into different sets and precons. But there are still 4 Titans that we haven't seen cards for yet, those being Daria, Taysir, Christiana, and Beau Lavar. While the characters don't have Planeswalker cards, they do actually have a few references in game. Out of the 4, Beau Lavar has shown up the most, being depicted on cards like Planeswalker's Mischief and Prophetic Bolt. And he even has his own Magic Arena Alchemy card, depicting him before his spark ignited with the card Crucius, Titan of the Waves. However, the other 3 haven't been as lucky. Daria appears in 1 card in the art of Aura Blast, and if you squint really closely, you can see Taysir in the art of Phyrexian Dreadnought. And unfortunately, Christiana, she only really appears on Urza Assembles the Titans. However, that's still better than the Planeswalker Parcher, who, along with Teferi, was actually supposed to be one of the original 9 Titans. However, they decided to change this and replace it with Christina instead. Speaking of, Christina's partner Sandrew is another one of our forgotten Planeswalkers, who doesn't actually appear on any cards, only appearing in the Homelands comics. And his mentor Feroz, who is actually the husband of the Planeswalker Sarah, didn't fare too much better, with him not actually being on any cards, but is directly referenced with the card Pharaoh's Band. And he also appears in the flavor text of some cards like Didgeridoo and Wizard School. Along with being a member of the 9 Titans, Christina was a part of another Planeswalker group called the Sages of Minorad. The members of the group were Liana, Grenfell Moore, Emberek, and Altier Coloni. None of these characters have any actual cards referencing them, and instead only really appear in the Armada comics. Another Planeswalker to only appear in the Armada comics was Fairland, along with his killer Kennen Sarmal. And both these Planeswalkers don't have any in-game references and only appear in the comics. However, one thing that's important about Fairland is he served as a mentor figure to the Planeswalker Rayvidel, who served as one of Magic the Gathering's earliest villains, serving as the main antagonist to the video game Magic the Gathering Battle Mage, a real-time strategy game that was released on the original PlayStation back in 1997. Despite this prominent role, Rayvidel has not actually appeared in-game or is referenced on any flavor text. Speaking of Magic video games, in 2001, the game Magic the Gathering was released on the Sega Dreamcast, and it came with a Planeswalker antagonist by the name of Absolute God Ah. That being said, it's extremely hard to find information on this guy, since this Dreamcast game was only released in Japan, so all the footage I could find is only in Japanese, a language which I don't speak, and he's so obscure that he doesn't even have his own page on the Magic Wiki, instead just appearing on lists of characters in the Planeswalker section. So if you know any information on this guy, please leave it in the comments because I'd love to know. Back to our forgotten Planeswalkers, there's a few that appear in the other video game, Magic the Gathering Chandalar. The main villain of Chandalar is a Planeswalker by the name of Arzakon, who's been trying to take over the plane. And there is another Planeswalker by the name of Yawden, who is one of Arzakon's main enemies, and he also previously attacked Chandalar. And both these Planeswalkers don't appear to be referenced in any official Magic the Gathering cards, and neither does the Planeswalker Vash Roga, who was in the very short-lived game Magic the Gathering Legends. She was a green mage from Dominaria who had a strong hatred for the Cabal. To finish up this section on Planeswalkers from Magic video games, the game that has the most forgotten Planeswalkers by far is of course Duels of the Planeswalkers. In Duels 2014, the story revolved around Chandra getting tricked into stealing the Dragon Skull. The main antagonist of said story was a Planeswalker by the name of Ramaz, who we actually get to see in-game footage of in multiple in-game cutscenes, but once again, no actual Magic the Gathering cards. Duel of the Planeswalkers also gave us a ton of potential new Planeswalkers, with 34 Planeswalker avatars to select from. While it may be easy to write these off as just profile photos, one of these walkers actually got their own card with Vronos Masked Inquisitioner. However, that's also because out of all these characters, he's the only one who's had any kind of story relevance, since he was one of the many victims of Garruk while he was under the curse of the Chain Veil, as we can see with the opening cutscene of Duels 2015. Along with Vronos, the game also featured 3 more of Garruk's victims, Kento, Beauregard, and Grinth. And there was also actually another victim that didn't appear in the game Duels of the Planeswalkers, instead appearing in the article Monster written by Ken Troop. The Planeswalker in question doesn't actually have a name. Instead, all we have to work off of is the nickname that Garruk gave them, Icy, which Garruk called them because, you know, they like use ice magic. Along with Icy, there are a ton of Planeswalkers that we've only seen in articles. Mazrith and Tessabik are Dominarian Planeswalkers that we only get to see in Matt Kovada's archived article Gentleman's Duel, where they obviously, you know, have a duel. The Planeswalker Fatima only appears in the old article titled City of Brass in the old Encyclopedia Dominia that Wizards used to run back in the 90s. The story she appears in is super cool, since it details how she created the City of Brass, but alas, none of these 3 are referenced in any cards. There was also Brand and Mindrel, who appeared in the article The Dark, where Brand attempts to use dark magic to destroy another Planeswalker, but instead ends up destroying himself and the entire plane instead. There was also another article featuring the characters Mezlok and Tashir, appearing in a series of articles by Mark Poole titled Mezlok's Challenge. And unfortunately, Mezlok doesn't appear in any cards, but Tashir actually does, appearing on the art for the card Natural Selection. Finally, the Planeswalker Crucius, not to be confused with Crucius, also appeared in a number of articles. Crucius is a Sphinx from the Esper Shard of the plane Alara, and is actually the inventor of the Ethereum that we see throughout it. Along with him appearing in a number of articles, he also features in the book Taste of Metal, written by Matthew Stover, which also features another Planeswalker by the name of Baltris, and she may or may not be dead because she died at the end of Agents of Artifice, but then showed up in Taste of Metal, which is weird because the author of Agents of Artifice wanted her to be dead, and then it's really confusing what's canon and what's not. And then also in the War of the Sparks books, we have another forgotten Planeswalker named Kazi, who is introduced and then immediately killed in the same book to make it seem like War of the Sparks had any stakes to it. The book titled Planeswalker by Lynn Abbey has 2 unknown Planeswalkers by the name of Manatarqua and Meshuval. Meshuval is the Planeswalker who explains to Urza how he ignited his spark and can Planeswalk, and Manatarqua was ignited by a giant fireball. The book Cursed Lands by Terry McLaren features the forgotten Planeswalker Tempe, and in the book, she has a numerous amount of rivals that are different Planeswalkers. And while they aren't given the same story significance, they are worth mentioning because we haven't seen them since. And those Planeswalkers are Platon, Krim, and the Thorn. Another book from around the same time was called Distant Planes by Kathy Ice, which features the Planeswalker Gerhardt, who is briefly mentioned in the book's anthology, Rathrasa, a human Planeswalker who was essentially the God Emperor until he got bored and decided to be a farmer instead, and we have Ram, who is a Dobenma Planeswalker, which is this race from Dominaria which consists of only women. In the Alpha rulebook, there were 2 Planeswalkers referenced called Thomil and Warzel, and in the story, they have a duel and Thomil ends up losing, and after he loses, he decides to summon the Lord of the Pit, and then dips. And unlike most of the other Planeswalkers that I've talked about today, these 2 are actually referenced in the flavor text of Segovian Angel. Along with real-world books, Magic the Gathering has also had a number of different comic books with unique Planeswalkers. In the recent series by Boom Comics, we were introduced to a Planeswalker by the name of Asona Maiv, a Planeswalker from the new plane Akin, that she may or may not have destroyed by attempting to use the power of Merit Lage to heal it, but then ended up freezing the plane instead. In the comic series The Spell Thief, the Planeswalker Sifa Grent serves as the main antagonist, and one thing that's really cool about this comic is that they actually made special Magic the Gathering cards as inserts in the comic. So she appears on a bunch of different arts, like Consume Spirit, Corrupt, Breath of Nelfgar, and is also referenced in the flavor text of the card Arrest. The Planeswalker Eskil appears in the comic Fallen Angel, and Eskil was a Dominarian Planeswalker who served as the guardian of the White Woods and is a mentor to the character Mangara, but isn't referenced on any cards. Another character who appeared in a bunch of comics from this time is probably one of the most well-known Planeswalkers that we don't actually have a card for yet, and that character is Leshrac. And he was one of Magic the Gathering's earliest big bads, and what's even crazier is that he actually appeared in the game Magic Legends, and he's referenced on a ton of cards, like Minions of Leshrac, Herald of Leshrac, and Leshrac's Right. And he's also referenced in flavor text of cards like Dark Ritual, Dark Banishing, and Parting Thoughts. The Planeswalkers Tyrius and Sylvan appear in one of the most unique ways we've ever been introduced to a Planeswalker, with the two being introduced in the Dungeons & Dragons adventure written for the Forgotten Realms set. Then finally, the most well-known Planeswalker that we don't have a Planeswalker card for yet is of course the Unluckiest. For those unfamiliar, the Unluckiest appears on the Curse Cycle from Commander 2017, depicting him being struck with unfortunate curses, and then reappearing on the card Flame Blitz in Modern Horizons 2. And then finally, in the Midnight Hunt Commander cards, we were introduced to the source of his unluckiness, Lind, Cheerful Tormentor. And I think if any Planeswalker that I talk about today would actually get a Magic the Gathering card in the future, it would be him. If you enjoyed this video, you should check out this other video I made where I suggested what Magic the Gathering's next Universes Beyond collaboration should be.